What does it mean to stand alone? Not as an act of defiance or rebellion, but as a way of being, a deliberate choice to walk a path unlit by the torches of others. For many, the idea of solitude provokes fear. It feels unnatural, lonely, or even dangerous. We equate being alone with being incomplete, as if the presence of another validates our existence. But let me ask you something. When was the last time you sat with yourself, without distraction, without noise, without the need for validation? Truly sat with the raw, unfiltered version of who you are? And if you did, were you at peace or were you running from what you found? Miyamoto Musashi, one of the greatest swordsmen in history, understood this. He understood that the loner is not someone who rejects society out of bitterness, nor someone who isolates themselves out of weakness. The loner in Musashi's philosophy is someone who has chosen to walk the narrow road of self-reliance, self-mastery, and self-awareness. It is a path few dare to tread because it demands everything. It demands that we confront the parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore. It demands that we find strength in the absence of external support. And most terrifying of all, it demands that we become utterly responsible for our lives. Musashi's life was a testament to this philosophy. He fought over 60 duels undefeated and wrote the Book of Five Rings, a timeless manual on strategy, combat, and life. But what set him apart was not just his skill with the sword. It was the way he lived his life alone, detached from material possessions, unbound by the expectations of others. He didn't just preach independence, he embodied it. And in doing so, he discovered something that our modern, hyper-connected world often forgets: strength comes from within, not from others. But let's be honest. The idea of being truly alone is terrifying, isn't it? In a world where we're constantly connected, constantly seeking approval, constantly comparing ourselves to others, the thought of standing alone feels like a kind of death. And in a way it is. It's the death of the ego that feeds on validation. It's the death of the false self that builds its worth on external achievements. It's the death of the part of us that believes we are incomplete without others. You see, Musashi's philosophy wasn't just about physical combat, it was about mastering the inner battle. And the first step in that battle is to face the fear of solitude. Because here's the truth: if you can't stand to be alone with yourself, what does that say about the relationship you have with yourself? If you need others to feel whole, what happens when they're gone? Musashi's way of the loner teaches us that solitude is not a punishment, it's a gift. It's in solitude that we discover who we really are. It's in solitude that we hear the whispers of our deepest truths. And it's in solitude that we forge the unshakable strength to walk our own path, no matter how difficult it may be. But solitude is not just about being physically alone. It's about a mindset. It's about detaching yourself from the need for approval, the need for validation, the need to fit in. It's about finding your center and staying grounded, even in the chaos of the world. When you can do that, you become unshakable. You become like a mountain, standing tall and firm, no matter how strong the winds of life may blow. Yet this path is not easy. It requires discipline, courage, and a willingness to face yourself. And let's be honest, most people aren't willing to do that. It's easier to distract ourselves with noise, to lose ourselves in relationships, to conform to the expectations of others. But what happens when the distractions fade? What happens when the relationships end? What happens when the expectations change? Musashi's philosophy challenges us to take full responsibility for our lives, to stop blaming others, stop making excuses, and stop waiting for someone else to save us. He believed that the true warrior is self-reliant, not just in battle but in life. And this self-reliance comes from solitude, from knowing that no matter what happens, you have the strength within to adapt, and to overcome. But let me ask you this, are you ready to take that responsibility? Are you ready to stop relying on others to define your worth, to give you direction, to make you feel whole? Because if you're not, you'll always be a prisoner of society, of relationships, of your own mind. True freedom comes when you can stand alone, unafraid and unapologetic. Musashi lived by a set of principles that guided his life. One of the most profound was this: think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world. What does that mean? To me, it means letting go of the ego, the part of us that clings to pride, to status, to the illusion of control. It means understanding that we are just one part of a much larger whole, and that our purpose is not to dominate but to harmonize. But how do we do this? How do we think lightly of ourselves in a world that constantly tells us to think more of ourselves, to build our brand, to chase fame and recognition? The answer lies in detachment. Musashi believed in detaching from everything that doesn't serve our higher purpose. That includes material possessions, toxic relationships, and even our own desires. Detachment doesn't mean indifference, it means freedom. It means not being a slave to the things that don't truly matter. Now, I'm not saying you should abandon everything and live in a cave. But I am saying that you should examine your life and ask yourself, what am I clinging to that's holding me back? What am I afraid to let go of? Because often, it's not the things we lack that weigh us down, it's the things we refuse to release. Musashi's philosophy teaches us that the loner is not someone who has nothing, the loner is someone who needs nothing. And in that needlessness lies true power. When you're no longer dependent on others for your happiness, your worth, your identity, you become unstoppable. You become free. But freedom comes at a cost. It requires sacrifice. It requires letting go of the safety net, the comfort zone, the familiar. It requires stepping into the unknown, not knowing what you'll find. And that's terrifying, isn't it? But here's the thing, the unknown is where growth happens. It's where transformation happens. It's where you discover who you truly are. So let me ask you again, are you willing to stand alone? Are you willing to face the fear, the discomfort, the uncertainty? Are you willing to let go of what's holding you back, even if it means losing everything you thought you needed? Because if you are, you'll find something far greater. You'll find yourself. Musashi's way of the loner is not for everyone. It's not for those who want an easy life, a comfortable life, a predictable life. It's for those who are willing to risk everything for the sake of becoming everything they were meant to be. It's for those who understand that true strength comes not from others, but from within. And so I leave you with this thought: what kind of life do you want to live? A life of comfort or a life of growth? A life of dependence or a life of freedom? A life of fear or a life of courage? The choice is yours. But remember this: the greatest battles you will ever face are not with others, but with yourself. And the only way to win those battles is to stand alone, unafraid, and unapologetic. What does it mean to let go? Not just in the physical sense, but in the profound, internal sense of detachment. We live in a world of clinging to ideas, to people, to possessions, to identities we've constructed for ourselves. But if you were stripped of everything you hold on to, who would you be? If your relationships ended, your possessions vanished, and your titles were erased, would you still recognize yourself? Detachment, as Musashi understood it, is not about giving up on life. It's about freeing ourselves from the things that enslave us, often without us even realizing it. Musashi lived a life of deliberate simplicity, not because he rejected the world, but because he understood its impermanence. He saw that everything we cling to, status, wealth, relationships, can be taken from us in an instant. And so rather than build his life on fragile foundations, He rooted himself in something unshakable, his own self-mastery. He famously said, "You must understand that there is more than one path to the top of the mountain." This wasn't just about strategy, it was about freedom to adapt, to change course, to let go of one path and choose another without losing your sense of direction. But let's be honest, letting go is one of the hardest things we can do, isn't it? We hold on so tightly to the things we think define us, the things we think we need to be happy or successful. We say, "I can't lose this job," or "I can't live without this person," or "I can't let go of this dream." But who told us that? Who taught us that our worth is tied to these things? What would happen if we dared to let go? Musashi's philosophy of detachment isn't about indifference. It's about clarity. When we cling to something, we lose perspective. We become so attached to the outcome that we forget the process. We become so afraid of losing that we stop taking risks. And when we stop taking risks, we stop growing. Detachment frees us from this trap. It allows us to see things as they really are, not as we wish them to be. It allows us to act with courage and decisiveness, unburdened by fear or doubt. But detachment doesn't mean abandoning responsibility. It doesn't mean withdrawing from the world or giving up on relationships. It means engaging with the world fully, but without losing yourself in it. It means loving deeply, but not clinging. It means working hard, but not being defined by your achievements. It means striving for excellence, but not being crushed by failure. Detachment is the ability to hold the world in your hands without letting it own you. Let's take a closer look at how this applies to our daily lives. Think about your relationships. How often do we confuse love with attachment? We say we love someone, but what we really mean is that we need them. We depend on them to fill a void in us to make us feel whole. But is that love, or is it fear? Fear of being alone, fear of facing ourselves, fear of losing control. True love, as Musashi's philosophy suggests, is not about possession. It's about freedom. It's about allowing others to be who they are without trying to control or change them. And it's about knowing that even if they leave, you will still be whole because your sense of self doesn't depend on anyone else. Now think about your goals. How often do we tie our self-worth to our achievements? We say, if I get this promotion, then I'll be happy, or if I reach this milestone, then I'll be successful. But what happens when we fail? What happens when we reach the goal and still feel empty? Musashi's philosophy teaches us to detach from outcomes. This doesn't mean we stop striving, it means we stop defining ourselves by the results. We focus on the process, on the discipline, on doing our best in every moment. And when we do this, we find that the results take care of themselves. But detachment isn't just about relationships or goals. It's also about our inner world, our thoughts, our emotions, our beliefs. How often do we cling to ideas that no longer serve us? How often do we hold on to resentment, anger, or fear, even when it's hurting us? Musashi believed that the true warrior must master not just the body but the mind. And mastering the mind begins with letting go of the thoughts and emotions that keep us stuck. Ask yourself, what are you holding on to that's holding you back? Is it a fear of failure? A need for approval? A belief that you're not good enough? What would happen if you let it go? Not suppressed it, not ignored it, but truly released it, as you would release a bird from your hand. Musashi's philosophy of detachment is not about becoming a cold, emotionless person. It's about becoming free. Free from fear, free from doubt, free from the need to control everything and everyone around you. It's about finding the strength to stand alone, not because you don't care, but because you care deeply about living authentically, about being true to yourself, about walking your own path, no matter where it leads. But let's be clear, detachment is not a one-time decision. It's a practice. It's something we must choose every day, in every moment. It's the choice to let go of the things that don't serve us, even when it's hard. It's the choice to trust ourselves, even when the path is uncertain. It's the choice to focus on what truly matters, even when the world tries to distract us. And this is where discipline comes in. Musashi was a master of discipline, not just in his training but in his life. He understood that freedom is not the absence of discipline, it's the result of discipline. When you master yourself, your thoughts, your emotions, your actions, you become unshakable. You become like a tree with deep roots, able to withstand any storm. But discipline is not about forcing yourself to do things you hate. It's about aligning your actions with your values. It's about living in a way that reflects who you truly are, not who the world expects you to be. And this requires honesty with yourself about what you want, what you need, and what you're willing to sacrifice to get there. Musashi's philosophy of detachment and discipline teaches us that we don't need to be controlled by the world around us. We don't need to be slaves to our desires, our fears, or our circumstances. We have the power to choose how we respond to life. And in that choice lies our freedom. So I ask you, what are you willing to let go of to gain that freedom? What are you willing to sacrifice to become the person you were meant to be? Because the truth is, you can't hold on to everything and expect to grow. You can't cling to the past and move forward at the same time. You can't be free if you're bound by the things you refuse to release. Musashi's way of the loner is not an easy path. It's not for those who want comfort or certainty or approval. It's for those who are willing to face the unknown, to embrace the uncertainty, to let go of everything they thought they needed in order to find what truly matters. And so, as we close this part of the journey, I leave you with this question: if you were to let go of everything that's holding you back, who would you become? If you were no longer defined by your fears, your doubts, or your attachments, what would you be capable of? The answer lies not in the world around you, but in the strength that comes from within. Now that we've explored the essence of solitude and the power of detachment, the question becomes, how do you turn these principles into something tangible? How do you take the clarity of mind that solitude provides and the freedom that detachment offers and channel them into action? Because ultimately, philosophy without action is hollow. Musashi was not a man of words alone. His philosophy was forged in the heat of battle, in the precision of his swordsmanship, and in the deliberate choices he made every day. His way was not just about thinking, it was about doing. And so we must ask ourselves, what does it mean to act? Not to react, not to drift aimlessly, but to act with purpose, with conviction, with power. You see, most of us live our lives on autopilot. We're swept along by circumstances, by routines, by the expectations of others. We react to the world around us instead of shaping it. But Musashi's way teaches us that the warrior does not wait for the world to act upon him. The warrior takes initiative. The warrior moves first. But let's not confuse movement with progress. In today's world, we prize busyness. We wear our packed schedules like badges of honor, as if constant activity equals accomplishment. But think about it, how much of your busyness is actually meaningful? How much of it moves you closer to your purpose? Musashi's life reminds us that true action is not about doing more, it's about doing what matters. It's about cutting away the unnecessary, just as a swordsman cuts away the inessential with a single, decisive stroke. This is where the discipline of solitude and detachment becomes crucial. Solitude gives you the space to reflect, to clarify your purpose, to strip away the noise of the world. Detachment frees you from the distractions, fears, and attachments that pull you off course. Together, they create a foundation for action that is deliberate, focused, and unstoppable. But deliberate action requires courage. And courage, in Musashi's philosophy, is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. Fear is natural. Fear is human. But fear becomes a problem when it paralyzes us, when it keeps us from taking the actions we know we must take. How often do we hesitate? Not because we lack the ability, but because we're afraid of failure, afraid of judgment, afraid of the unknown. Musashi's way of the warrior teaches us to face fear head-on. In battle, hesitation can be fatal. The same is true in life. When we hesitate, we give our fears power. We allow them to dictate our choices, to keep us small, to hold us back. But when we act decisively, boldly, without hesitation, we take that power back. We reclaim control over our lives. But decisive action doesn't mean reckless action. Musashi was a master strategist, and his victories were not the result of brute force but of careful planning and execution. He understood that every action has consequences, and that success depends on understanding the terrain, the opponent, and the timing. The same applies to life. Before you act, you must ask yourself, what is the purpose of this action? What am I trying to achieve? And what is the most effective way to achieve it? This is where the principle of adaptability comes in. Musashi believed in the importance of being like water, flexible, formless, able to adapt to any situation. He wrote, "You must be able to adapt to any situation, at any time, in any place." This is the essence of strategy, the ability to adjust your approach based on the circumstances without losing sight of your ultimate goal. But adaptability requires humility. It requires letting go of rigid plans and preconceived notions. It requires accepting that the path you envisioned may not be the path you end up taking. How often do we cling to a plan, even when it's no longer working, simply because we're too proud to admit we were wrong? Musashi's philosophy reminds us that true strength is not stubbornness. True strength is the ability to pivot, to change direction, to find another way forward. Let's talk about failure, because if we're honest, one of the biggest obstacles to action is the fear of failing. We're so afraid of falling short, of making mistakes, of being judged, that we hesitate to even try. But here's the truth: failure is inevitable. Even Musashi, with all his mastery, faced defeat in the smaller battles of life. But what set him apart was his ability to learn from failure, to use it as a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block. When you act, you will fail, you will make mistakes, you will face setbacks. But the warrior's path is not about avoiding failure, it's about learning from it. It's about picking yourself up, adjusting your strategy, and moving forward with even greater clarity and resolve. Failure is not the opposite of success, it's a necessary part of the journey. But action is not just about external achievements, it's also about internal mastery. Musashi believed that the warrior's greatest battles are fought within. The battle against fear, doubt, distraction, laziness, these are the true enemies. And the only way to defeat them is through discipline. Discipline is not glamorous. It's not exciting. It's mundane, repetitive, often uncomfortable. But it's also the foundation of greatness. Think about your daily life. How often do you let your emotions dictate your actions? How often do you give in to procrastination, to distraction, to the temptation of the easy path? Musashi's way teaches us that the warrior does not act based on how he feels in the moment. The warrior acts based on his purpose, his principles, his commitment to something greater than himself. But this kind of discipline requires self-awareness. You cannot master yourself if you do not know yourself. And this brings us back to solitude. In solitude, we come face to face with our true selves, not the version we show to the world, but the version that exists in the quiet moments when no one is watching. And in those moments, we have a choice to ignore what we see or to confront it. Musashi's life was a constant process of self-confrontation. He didn't shy away from his weaknesses, he faced them, studied them, and worked tirelessly to overcome them. This is the essence of the warrior's path, the relentless pursuit of self-mastery. It's not about being perfect, it's about being better than you were yesterday. But self-mastery is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. The purpose of mastering yourself is so that you can serve something greater than yourself. Musashi's philosophy was not about selfishness or isolation, it was about living in harmony with the world while remaining true to yourself. It was about finding your unique path and walking it with integrity, courage, and purpose. So let me ask you, what is your path? What is the purpose that drives you, the vision that compels you to act? And are your daily actions aligned with that purpose? Because if they're not, you're wasting your time. Life is too short to spend it on things that don't matter. The warrior's path is not an easy one. It demands solitude, detachment, discipline, courage, adaptability, and relentless action. But it's also a path of freedom, purpose, and fulfillment. It's a path that leads to the truest version of yourself, not the version shaped by the world, but the version shaped by your own choices, your own values, your own inner strength. And so, as we come to the end of this exploration, I leave you with one final question. Are you ready to walk the warrior's path? Not in theory, not in words, but in action. Are you ready to stand alone, to let go of what no longer serves you, to face your fears, and to take deliberate, purposeful action toward the life you were meant to live? The choice is yours. But remember this, the path of the warrior is not for the faint of heart. It is for those who are willing to risk everything for the sake of becoming everything they were meant to be. It is for those who understand that true strength comes not from others, but from within. And it is for those who know that the greatest battle they will ever face is the battle with themselves, and that victory lies not in avoiding the fight, but in embracing it with everything they have.